Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Daf Ayin. We're 3 lines from the top of the Amud, and the Gemara is going to discuss for us some halachas of Eruv, actually some halachas of Bittul, and we begin with a shaila. Abaye asked Rabbi the following question: you have 5 people living together in a chatzar, and they established an Eruv amongst themselves, except for one fellow, and one of them forgot to take part in the Eruv. So now it's Shabbos, he'd like to make bittul, to allow them to carry. How is he meant to do that? When he's mevatel his rishus, tzarich levatel l'chol echad ve'echad. Is he required to approach each one individually? I'm mevatel my rishus to you, and to you, and to you. Or perhaps that's not necessary. Why would I think it's not necessary? That's because they have already joined together through an Eruv. The other people, that is. And once they've done that, they've become one community, one combined entity. So perhaps it would be enough for him to approach one of them on behalf of all of them, be mevatel to him, and that affects them all. Meaning whatever he gives this person becomes disseminated throughout this entire Eruv configuration, Eruv arrangement, and they all receive the mevatel's rishus. So that's the question. Does he need to go to each one individually, or perhaps it is sufficient for him to mevatel to one of them, and automatically that will be applied to the rest of the Eruv members? So Rabbi responded, yes, indeed, he needs to go over to each one individually and mevatel rishus to him. And the svara would be because, if it would have happened before Shabbos, then you can say that the fact that he gave his rishus to one of the Eruv members automatically means that it becomes distributed amongst all of them. Because let's remember the Eruv, and anything associated with it becomes activated during Ben Hashmoshes. But that's if it would have happened before Shabbos. Here, he'd like to make the bittul on Shabbos. So at this point, the Eruv has already been activated, has already been configured the way it's been configured. And now that he's coming to add, to contribute, he's taking his rishus and giving it over to them. When he gives it to one of them, it won't automatically be redistributed amongst all the Eruv members, because their Eruv is already in place, in the way it's been established during Ben Hashmoshes, and that can't change. Therefore, he needs to go over to each one individually and mevatel his rishus to him. And that's Rabba's response. That is required, and otherwise, the bittul will not be received by all the other members of the chatzar. Abaye asked him a kasha from a brayso, which seems to indicate that there's no need to go over to each one individually. When you're being mevatel to people who have an Eruv amongst themselves, they're considered to be one entity, and being mevatel to one of them is sufficient for all. So he asked him a kasha from a brayso. The brayso will give us actually 7 different halachas, 7 different scenarios of bittul. There's a ratio of the brayso. The first portion discussing 4 cases where bittul is effective. Then we have a second part, a seif on the brayso, with 3 cases where bittul is not effective. So the brayso begins like this: Echad shlei irev, and actually the raya that Abaye is going to bring, the kasha on Rabbah, is really from the first halach in the brayso. So that's really the only thing that pertains to our discussion. But the Gemara will already bring the whole brayso and embark on a whole discussion, analyze all the halachas in the brayso. So the brayso begins with the first case being as follows: Echad shlei irev, if one person didn't make an Eruv. So there were 3 people, for instance, in the chatzar, Eruvin, Shimon, and Levi, and Shimon and Levi made an Eruv, and Eruvin did not participate. So he'd like to go ahead and be mevatel's rishus. Echad shlei irev, noisen rishus leechad shiriv. He can approach the other fellow there who made an Eruv. So Eruvin, who didn't make an Eruv, will approach Shimon, who had made an Eruv with Levi, and will be mevatel rishus to him. Now let's just stop for a second. It seems from here that when you be mevatel to people that already made an Eruv, you don't need to go over to each person individually. Right? That's what Bryce is saying. You can be mevatel le'echad she'iriv, to merely one of those people of those two people that made an Erev amongst themselves. And this will be the raya that Abaye will bring to his Shita, to Akasha, to Rabbah, that we see from here there's no need to go ahead and mevatel to each person who takes part in the Erev. So that's the first case. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. 7 lines from the top. Echad shel Erev, says Rashi, Kigoin, for instance, Gimel Diyurin b'Chatzer. We have 3 people living in a Chatzer, Hashnaim Erevu. 2 of them participated in an Erev, Vashlish shel Erev, the third did not take part. Mevatel Echad Na'arvin. He can mevatel to one of those 2 people that have established an Erev amongst themselves. Umutter. And then it's mutter to carry in the Chatzer. Why? Because the recipient of this bittul has an Erev with his friend. So therefore it's enough that you mevatel to him, and automatically that affects both of the Erev parties. And they don't interfere with each other because they have an Erev, so everything's fine. Alma apparently ain't tzarech levatel, elo le'echad. There's no need to mevatel only to one of them. The kulu havu kechad. So here Rashi brings out the punchline of the svara. Why would I think it's enough to mevatel to one? Because they're all like one entity. Since they've joined together with an Erev, we view them as one single entity, and it's enough to mevatel to one member of that Erev. So that's the first case in the Brisa. Proceeds the Brisa with case number 2. Shnaim she'irvu. If we have 2 people that made an Erev with each other, if they choose to do so, they can go ahead and give their rishus. So nice rishus means bittul, right? You give away your rishus to a third person who didn't participate in their Erev. They can do him a favor, give him their rishus to allow him to carry. Case number 3 is ushnaim shelo yirvu. 2 people that did not make an Erev amongst themselves. Nice rishus and ushnaim she'irvu. They can go ahead and pass on their rishus to 2 other members of the Chatzer who have established an Erev amongst themselves. So these 2 people will receive the rishus through the bittul, and they can carry because there's no interference. They amongst themselves made an Erev. Oy, this is the 4th case, oy le'echad shel Erev. So again, the 2 people that didn't make an Erev can be nice in their rishus to one person who hasn't made an Erev, because he's just one person and there's nobody interfering with him. He becomes the sole property owner of the Chatzer. So we have 4 cases where bittul is fine, is effective. The Brisa proceeds with a seifa of the Brisa, giving us another 3 cases where bittul will not work. Aval bat ein echad she'irv, noisin rishusay le'echad shel Erev. A person who made an Erev. So we have Reuven and Shimon who made an Erev with each other. So Reuven, one of these 2 people, cannot go ahead to a third person, to Levi, and give him his rishus, because he's not there by himself. It's Reuven with Shimon that made an Erev with each other. So even if Reuven decides to give his rishus to the other person, to Levi, but unless Shimon also is mevatel the rishus, it's worthless. Since Reuven and Shimon have already joined together in Erev. It's a joint usage, it's a joint entity. And in this case, only Reuven is giving away the rishus. That's not enough. So since Shimon didn't participate in the bittul, it doesn't work. So ein echad she'irv, a person who made an Erev cannot go ahead and nice rishus le'echad shel Erev to a third person who has not participated in the Erev, because only one of the 2 people that made an Erev is doing the bittul. So unless the other person participates, the bittul won't work. Case number 6, ve'ein shnaim she'irvu. And the same thing would happen if 2 people who made an Erev cannot go ahead and noisen rishus on l'shnaim shel Erev. They can't give their rishus to 2 people who don't have an Erev. And the reason here is, although the 2 people who have an Erev both went ahead and did bittul, so they gave everything away, but who do they give it to? To 2 people who don't have an Erev. So as we learned yesterday, people who don't have an Erev cannot be recipients of a bittul, because fine, they'll accept the rishus, but now we have 2 people here who don't have an Erev amongst themselves, and they're interfering with each other. And finally, case number 7 is ve'ein shnaim shelo yirvu, noisen rishusan l'shnaim shelo yirvu. This is very similar. Two people who didn't make an Erev amongst themselves can't go ahead and give their Rishus b'mavatal. Their Rishus to two people who don't have an Erev, because here as well, the mikablim of the bittul, the receivers, can't carry, because there's no Erev amongst themselves. They interfere with each other. So you have 7 cases. We have a Reisha with 4 cases where bittul is fine, and a Seifa with 3 cases where bittul doesn't work. Now, what pertains to our Gemara is as follows. Let's go back to that first case, Katan Emiyas Reisha. At any rate, the Brisa begins by saying, Echad Shali Irev, Noisim Rishusel Echad Shirev. If we have 3 people living in the Chatzah, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and Reuven didn't take part in the Erev, Shimon and Levi do have an Erev. Reuven cannot go ahead. Reuven can go ahead and be mavatal his rishus to one of the other members of the Erev. So echad shalei Erev, noisin rishusoi lechad shirev. Says the Gemara, hey chidami, what are we speaking about here? If the person who's receiving the bittul has no one else there with him, he's the only one around. So we only have 2 people in the chatzah. We have Reuven, who is giving his rishus hazim mavatal to Shimon. There's no Levi here. Bahadiman Erev. So what do you mean that he's giving it to Shimon who made an Erev? All we have is Reuven and Shimon. There was nobody else here for Shimon to make an Erev with. Apparently, there is somebody else there. There's a third party in the chatzah. So we have Reuven, who didn't participate in the Erev that Shimon and Levi made amongst themselves. Uktani in the Brisa says that Shimon could merely approach one of the 2 Erev members. Uktani le'echat she'erev. All he needs to do is be mevatel rishus to one of those 2 people. He doesn't need to go over to each one individually. To Shimon and say, I'm giving you my rishus. To Levi and give me your rishus. He doesn't have to do that. All he needs to do is go over to one of them, either Shimon or Levi. That's enough. So this is the kasha that Abaye asked on Rabbah. Apparently, one has the ability to mevatel rishus to a group of people who made an Erev, and he doesn't need to go ahead and do it individually to each one specifically. All he needs to do is approach one of them, because as Rashi said, Tekulu habukuchad, regard them all as one entity. And this is pretty apparent from our Brisa. It says of Rabbah, what's Rabbah going to respond and answer? Rabbah, who said that you need to go over to each person individually, he's going to say, we're speaking about the Hava Umes. Then initially there were 3 people in the Chatzah. There was Reuven, who didn't participate in the Erev that Shimon and Levi made. So Levi was around Erev Shabbos, made an Erev, Umes, and then he passed away on Shabbos. So that answers the question. There was an Erev here because there were 2 people there making an Erev. But right now, currently, one of them is no longer here. So that explains why Reuven could just approach Shimon and do the bittul because there's no Levi around. But if there would be somebody else here, if both Erev members would be around, of course you have to do it individually to each one separately. It says, if we're speaking about that the Erev partner was around, but now he's no longer here, passed away, Ema safe. Let's take a look at the next part of the Brisa, which says like this. The Brisa says that a person who made an Erev, so let's say we have Reuven and Shimon, who made an Erev with each other, if one of them decides to mevatel rishus, he can't do that. He can't go ahead and approach Levi, who didn't make an Erev, and give him his rishus. Why? So the simple way to understand this halach is because Reuven is not the sole property owner here. He made an Erev with Shimon. He's only a partial owner. If just him going over to Levi and being mavat, that's not enough. Unless Shimon joins the bittul, Levi hasn't really received anything, because Reuven is a partner with Shimon. So that's the halach in the Brisa. Ein echad she'irev, a person who made an Erev cannot go ahead and be nice and rishusay le'echad she'irev. Now let's analyze. If, according to Rabbah, What happened was that the Eruv partner was around, but is no longer here. So what's the problem? Why can't he go ahead and mevatel rishus? He's the sole property owner. Reuven and Shimon established an Eruv amongst themselves, Erev Shabbos. At that point, they were partners. But no longer. Shimon is no longer here. He was here, but then he passed away. So Reuven remains the sole property owner. And now you can go ahead and mevatel to Levi. There's no other partner to the Erev here. So according to you, Rabbi, that the partner is no longer here, what's the problem? Why can't he be mevatel? Elapshita. Apparently, we're speaking about the Isay, that his Erev partner is here. Okay. The Sefer the Isay. So apparently, since in the Sefer we're describing a case where his Erev partner is present, that creates complications, because it's not only his reshus, he has a partner. Just his bittul is not sufficient. Doesn't address his partner's part in the chatzah. So that's the problem. The partner is here. If that's the case, Reisha Nami the Isay. Let's assume that the case in the Reisha as well, meaning that first case in the Brisa, where a person who didn't make an Erev is going to approach another person who made an Erev, and mevatel rishus, and the Brisa says he can do so, even though he's only approaching and doing bittul to one of the Erev participants. Reisha Nami the Isay, apparently, all the participants of the Erev, all the partners are here. Nobody died. And still now, what do we see? That bittul is effective. Apparently, when you would be mevatel to people that have an Erev, you only need to do so to one of them. You don't need to address all of them individually. He doesn't want to know, there's no right. Meet the area. It's not a right. How kedisa? Each case is describing a different scenario. The Reisha, first case there is describing a case where the fellow Erev member is no longer here, in which case there's no need to approach him. It's enough to approach whoever is here. And the Sefer, where a person who made an Erev and would like to make bittul cannot do so unless all the Erev members are going to be mevatel. It's speaking where the Erev members are here. They're alive. In this case, the bittul won't work unless they all participate in the bittul. Says Morteda, this is Rabbi speaking, I'll prove it to you. That what? That you need to make bittul to every member individually. The Tani say for the Reisha, because the last portion of the first part of the Brisa tells us as follows. We have two people that don't have an Erev, they can be mevatel rishus to two people that have an Erev. The Brisa seems to be telling us very clearly that the bittul needs to be addressed to two people, to those two people that made an Erev. You can't simply go to one of them and suffice with that. So this seems to be a clear raya, says Rabbah, to my opinion, that when one is doing bittul to a group of people who have an Erev, you need to approach each one of them and do the bittul. Says Abaye Amar, and Abaye will respond as follows: that although the Brisa is saying that the bittul takes place to two people, the Brisa doesn't mean you have to actually be mevatel to both of them independently. Ma'ila beis, what does the Brisa mean? That they are nice and they're just to two, la'echon beis, to one of those two. And that already activates the bittul to both of them, because they're both one entity. Says Yahachi, that's the case. Listen to le'echad she'iriv. Why does the Brisa say that they are nice and rishus to shnaim she'irivu? It seems to indicate that you need to be mevatel to both of them. The Brisa could have simply said they give the rishus to one of them, made an Erev, to one of the two Erev participants, or le'echad shalai Erev, or to one of them, or to one person who hadn't made an Erev. So why does the Brisa use these words which seem to indicate that you need to make the bittul to both of them? And according to Rav Shit, indeed, we leave this question unresolved. The wording of the Brisa seems to be difficult according to Abai. Okay, so in conclusion, we had a question where a person would like to be mevatel rishus to a group of people who have an Erev. Does he need to approach each one independently? Or do we say, well, since they're already connected with each other, they're considered to be one single entity, and even if he's going to be matal on Shabbos, all he needs to do is approach one of them on behalf of them all. Abaye says, that's enough. And Rabbi says, no, you need to be matal to each one independently. Abaye had a kasha from the Brisa, and Rabbi responded that the Brisa is not a kasha because although the Brisa seems to say that you only need to be matal to one of the Erev members, yeah, says Rabbi, because we're speaking where the other member's not around, passed away. In which case there's no need to do more than be matal to this person that's around. Now the Gemara is going to proceed and analyze, review all the cases in this Brisa, 7 cases in all. We have a ratio with 4 cases where the bittul works, and the Sefer 3 cases that bittul doesn't work. The Gemara is going to explain what is the chiddush of each case. What is the lesson being taught by each of these cases? Begins the Gemara back with the first case. Echad shalei iriv, noisim rishusay lechad she'iriv. So once again, this is the case where 3 people were in a chatzar, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven didn't participate in the Erev that Shimon and Levi established. He'd like to make bittul on Shabbos. Says Bryce, he can do so. Echad shalei iriv, this fellow who didn't make an Erev, noisim rishusay lechad she'iriv, can be noisim rishus to one of those people that made an Erev. He doesn't need to approach both. Explains the Gemara. Le'abaye de'isei. According to Abaye, very simple. We're speaking even where both members of that Erev, meaning Shimon and Levi, who made an Erev amongst themselves, are here, are present, fully alive and awake. Still, Reuven doesn't need to approach both. And this is in accordance with Abaye's chiddush that when you do bittul to members of an Erev, you don't need to approach them both. The kamash malan, yeah, this is the chiddush. There's no need to invatal to each one independently. That's the chiddush of this halacha. However, l'rabba, you must say the havel mis, that Shimon's Erev partner, meaning Levi, was around during Erev Shabbos when they made the Erev Umeis, and now he died. And he's no longer present. And that explains why Reuven only needs to be mevatel to Shimon. He's not to be concerned about Levi because he's not around. But if he would be around, certainly it wouldn't work. You need to approach each one independently. So Rabbi interprets the Brisa as speaking as a case where the partner is not around. And what's the chiddush? The chiddush that we're not concerned that if we allow this, then perhaps one's going to apply the same concept in the case where Isay, where the Erev partner is present, and will neglect to do bittul to both parties of the Erev arrangement. No, we're not geyser, we're not concerned about that. We allow, in this case where the Erev partner is no longer here, we allow the mevatel to approach only one of those 2 members. And I'm not concerned that he's going to apply it to a case where both Erev participants are present. So that explains the first halacha of the Bryce. The second halacha is, we have 2 people who made an Erev. They can pass on the Rishus to one person, to the third fellow on the Chatzar, who didn't take part in the Erev. So they give everything away to him. Now he becomes the sole property owner, and the carrying can take place. Says Rav Pshita, isn't that self-evident? Why would I think that should be a problem? It's pretty straightforward halacha. Perhaps I would think, given like Erev, since this third person neglected the Erev, he didn't take part in the Erev. What are they going to say? We should make a knas, penalize him. Bittul is not a way to go. He meant to make an Erev. The fact that he neglected to participate in the Erev, that should be a reason to penalize him, and they shouldn't be allowed to be mevatel rishus to him. Kamash malon, the mission tells us, the Brisa tells us, we don't make a knas and we allow the bittul to take place. Case number 3, ubei shalei yirvu. We have 2 people who don't have an erev. Noisim rishus on the shnayim she'irvu. They can be noisim rishus to another 2 members of the chatzah who have an erev. So what is the chiddush here? The chiddush here is twofold. According to Rabbah, who holds that you need to make bittul to all members of the Erev arrangement. L'Rabbah Tana Seifa l'Glui Reisha. This halacha of the Brisa is an indication, is a Gili Milsa, that generally speaking, you have to do bittul to all members of the Eruv. You have to go over to each one individually. And this explains how do we see that? Because it's very clear in this halacha that two that made an Eruv are going to be nesem just the shnaim she'iru. You have to make a bittul to each one. So although they have an Eruv, you need to approach each one independently. And that will indicate for us, explain for us why in the Reisha, in that first case, there's no need for that person to be mevatel to both of the Eruv arrangement, because we're speaking about apparently that one of them is no longer here, in accordance with Rabbi's interpretation. So Rabbi maintains that this halacha in the Brisa is here to serve the following purpose: to teach us the true meaning of that first halacha in the Brisa. Meaning the halacha here that clearly tells us that when you do Eruv to two people whom you do bittul to two people who have an Eruv, you're required to approach both of them, indicates to us that that is the rule of thumb. And apparently, when the ratio in that first halacha told us that there's no need to be mevatel to both of them, Brisa said if you have three people, one of them didn't take part in the Eruv, he can approach one of the other two and do bittul. Why is that enough? Apparently because we're speaking about that the other person's not here, passed away. So that's the chiddush according to Rab. LeAbaye. However, according to Abaye, this pshat doesn't work, because according to Abaye, even this case here that we just mentioned does not indicate at all that there's a need to do bittul to all members of the Eruv arrangement. As Abaye told us earlier, that when the Brisa here says two people that didn't make an Eruv are going to be noisim rishus l'shnaim she'irvu, doesn't mean to both of them. Le'echad mibeis. It's enough to go to one of those two and do the bittul. So, according to Abaye, what's the chiddush of this halacha here? Brisa says two people that didn't make an Eruv can give their rishus to people who have made an Eruv. It seems to be a pretty standard halacha here. Says the Gemara, Abaye beishlei irvu tzrichle. The Brisa needs to inform us that even in this case, bittul will work. Even when we have two people who didn't make an Eruv and they're looking to be mevatel rishus, it's going to work. Why should I think otherwise? Perhaps there would be room to think. Ligzar, let's make it gzer. Dilma asi livtulilu. This may lead to confusion. People will say, look at those two people that didn't make an Eruv, and they're going to be mevatel their rishus to other people. So perhaps just as they can hand over the rishus, they can be the recipients of bittul as well. And we know that's not the case, because when two people don't have an Eruv, they can't be makabel rishus. We learned that yesterday, because they interfere with each other. So perhaps one thing will lead to the next. If we allow them to be mevatel, this will lead to them being makabel, receiving bittul from others, and that doesn't work. Kamash Malon, the Brisa teaches us there's no such concern. And now we have the fourth halacha. Oy le'echad shel Eruv. If we have two people that don't have an Eruv, they can go ahead and be mevatel their rishus to a third person sitting in the chatzar, who likewise didn't make an Eruv. Now, what is the chiddush here? It seems to be a very clear-cut, straightforward halacha. Lamali, why is it need to discuss this halacha? Perhaps I would think, Hanimili, you know when we allow bittul to take place, when at least somebody in the chatzar made an Eruv. But in a case where nobody made an Eruv, such as in this last case where we have three people living in the chatzar, nobody made an Eruv. Right? We have two people who didn't make an Eruv, they want to be mevatel to the third person who didn't make an Eruv. So perhaps in this case, liknesinu, Chacham will make a knas. We don't allow this bittul to take place and to allow carrying. So as to ensure that the children remember about the concept of Eruv. Look, this place doesn't have an Eruv whatsoever. They're just using the bittul option to allow carrying. Nobody bothers making an Eruv. People will forget about the whole concept of Eruv. So perhaps that would be a reason to prevent the bittul from taking effect. Kamash Malon, the Brisa teaches us, no, we don't have that concern. And bittul can work even in this case. So we just concluded the 4 cases of the Reish of the Brisa, in which all the cases, the bittul will work. Now we're going to proceed to the Seif of the Brisa. We have 3 scenarios where bittul doesn't work. Aval. This is case number 5. Aval ein echad she'iriv, noisen reshusei le'echad she'iriv. But a person who made an Erev. So we have Reuven and Shimon who have an Erev. Reuven, who made an Erev, cannot go ahead and approach a third person, Levi, and be Matal Rishus. Now why is that? Because he has a partner. He has already shared his possessions, his usage rights with a partner. So in order for the bittul to be valid, both partners need to transfer their rishus. It's not enough that one of them transfers. He's not the sole owner of that usage right, of those usage rights. Therefore, the Brisa says that this person, one person, the main cannot go ahead on his own and be mevatel rishus to another person that didn't have an erev. So what is the chiddush here? It says in Abaye Tana Seifa L'Gli Reisha. This seems to be a straightforward halacha. What was the chiddush here? So the Gemara explains like this. According to Abaye, the chiddush is like this: that the Seifa, meaning this halacha that I just mentioned, and the reason, the basis of this halacha being that there's another person here, there's another participant in the erev. We have two people that made an erev, and that's why one of them can't on his own do bittul. This indicates to us, Tana Seifa L'Gli Reisha. This indicates to us that whenever we speak about people having made an erev in this brisa, we're speaking about a case where the both of the participants of that erev are present, are alive. Because that's the reason why this halacha won't work. Because he has a partner here. He can't do it on his own. So this is a gilu's indication to the Reisha as well. All the way back in the beginning of the Brisa, in case number 1, which was the point of contention between Abai and Rabbah. Right? That case where we had 3 people in the Chatzar, and Reuven would like to make bittul to Shimon and Levi who made an erev. And the Brisa tells us all he needs to do is approach one of those 2 people, let's say Shimon, doesn't need to approach Levi. And Abai brought it right from there that we see that you can make bittul to people that have an erev simply by going over to one of them. So Rabbi said, well, we're speaking that the other person is no longer here. And Abai said, no, the person is here, and it's still enough to go over to one of them. Says Abai, this seifa, this halacha that we just mentioned, which is evidently speaking where both members of the erev are present, is an indication that the whole Brisa is speaking about that all the members of the erev are present, including that first case in the Brisa. And despite the fact that both erev members are alive, it is enough to be matal to one of them, and this supports Abaye's shita. So that's the point of this most recent halacha in the Brisa. Again, the case was that Reuven and Shimon made an erev. And the Brisa says it's not enough that Reuven will approach the other person, the third person, Levi, and be mevatel, because he has a partner, he has Shimon, who's present. So this halacha is coming to teach us that the erev participants are present. So this is according to Abai. The Rabbah, however, according to Rabbah, who holds that in the that first case over there, back at the beginning of the Brisa, the reason why bittul works to only one of those 2 erev members is because the other person is no longer here. He was mace, passed away. So he doesn't have Abaye's need to indicate, to demonstrate from the seifa. So what's the chiddush of the seifa? Why discuss this case, which seems to be a very straightforward case? We have 2 people that made an erev. It's not enough that one of them should give over their shus. He's not a sole owner here. He has a partner here. So what's the chiddush here? Says the Gemara, you're right, there's no chiddush here. But l'Rabba, I did Tana Reisha, Tana Nami Seif. Since in the Reisha, we had a similar case, just in the reverse, where a person who didn't make an erev can be mevatel just to somebody that did make an erev. So that's why the Brisa and the Seifa, this is the manner of the Brisa to just go ahead and switch the case in the reverse and list it, include in the list. That in the reverse case it won't work. If we have a person that didn't make an erev, cannot be mevatel to a person that didn't make an erev. Fine, there's no real chiddush here. It's just on account of the Reisha, we go ahead and we list this case as well. Proceeds the Gemara with the 6th case in the Brisa, However, two people that made an Eruv, they can't go ahead and be Mavatal to another two people who don't have an Eruv. Why is that? Very simple, because you can't receive Rishus when you have interference. The two receivers here interfere in each other because they don't have an Eruv amongst themselves. Says Sulamali. What's the Chiddush here? Isn't that pretty straightforward halacha? That two people living in a chutzner cannot carry unless they go ahead and establish an Eruv. Says apparently we're speaking about a case where the Batale Chadim Nai L'Chavri, that, let's say we have four people, Reuven and Shimon, who have an Eruv, and they'd like to pass on their rishus to Levi and Yehuda, right? Another two people don't have an Eruv, and Levi will give over whatever he receives to Yehuda. If Levi and Yehuda receive the rishus from Reuven and Shimon, Levi is going to turn around and pass everything over to Yehuda. He's going to do bittul to Yehuda. So at the end of the day, there's only going to be one person in the chatzar, one sole property owner. There's no interference. So perhaps in this case it would work. One of those two is going to be vatal to his friend. Perhaps I would think that it works. That at the end of the day it becomes mutter for that last person, for Yehuda. Kamash Malon. The Brisa here is teaching us that this doesn't work. Why not? The battle. Since at that point in time, when the other members were being mavatal to these two people, so Levi not have any usage rights in the chatzar. He can't carry, because at that point he had interference from Yehuda here, because Levi and Yehuda both received the property from Reuven and Shimon. So since at that point he had no practical allowance in this chatzar, it doesn't work, because he never really got anything. He never really got anything to pass on. So this is a carbon copy of the Gemara we had yesterday in Samach Tes. So the chiddush here is that it will not work, even though ultimately everything is ending up by Yehuda. But since along the way, when Levi received his portion, he couldn't do anything with it. He couldn't use it because he had interference from Yehuda. We consider it as though he didn't get anything. So he got nothing and can't pass on anything, and the whole arrangement doesn't work. So that's the chiddush of this halacha. And finally, halacha number 7 is ve'ein shnayim shlei irvu. Likewise, two people that didn't make an eruv cannot go ahead and be nois and rishus on the shnayim shlei irvu, to give it over to two people who don't have an eruv. Hasulamali. Why this halacha? It seems to be a repetition of the previous one. The bottom line is that the receivers don't have an eruv, so they interfere with each other, and they can't carry. Lamali. Why does the Brisa need to list this case? Apparently we're speaking about a case, the Amri Kni al Nas Laknis, that initially when Reuven and Shimon did bittul to Levi and Yehuda, they specifically told Levi, let's say, you're not the final destination of our property rights. You're merely a transit point. Kni, acquire, al Nas Laknis, on condition that you pass it on to Yehuda. So that's the final goal here. So perhaps in this case it would work, because although at the point where Levi is receiving the property from the Mavatlim, he can't really use it, perhaps that's not important. It's irrelevant, because he's not meant to use it in any case. He's meant to pass it on to Yehuda. He's just serving as a shliach for Reuven and Shimon. So perhaps in this case it would work. The Brisa comes and teaches us, no, it doesn't work, because at the end of the day he needs to take it to pass it on. He has nothing to take, because he can't use the bittul, he can't use the chatzar at this point, since he has interference from Yehuda. Okay, so in summary, we had a shaila that Abaye asked Rabba, when you're making bittul to people who have an eruv, do you need to go over to each one individually, or is it enough to approach one of them? Rabba told him, if you're doing the bittul on Shabbos, you need to approach each one independently. Abaye maintains, no, it's enough to go over to one of them, and Rashi explains, because the kulu havukachad, all regarded as one and the same entity. Abaye brought a kasha from a brisa, which seems to indicate that it's enough to go over to one of them. Rabbi responded, we're speaking where the other one is no longer around. So we have a brisa with 7 cases. We have a Reisha discussing 4 cases where bittul works, and a Seifa 3 cases that bittul doesn't work. So the Reisha begins with case number 1, that one person who didn't make an Erev can be Neisim Rishusai to one person who made an Erev. So we have 3 people living in a Chatzar. He can approach one of those 2 people that made an Erev, Mivatal Rishus. According to Abai, the Chiddush is that all he needs to do is approach one of those 2 people. According to Rabbah, we're speaking where there's only one around, other one passed away. And the Chiddush here is that we're not concerned that if we allow it in this case, it's going to be allowed in the case where all people are around. There's no reason to make this clear. That's the Chiddush of this halacha. Next case was 2 people that made an Erev can be mevatel to one person who hadn't made an Erev. What is the Chiddush here? That we don't say, well, if you didn't make an Erev, we'll make a knas. You can't be makabel rishos. No, we don't make that knas. Next case was 2 people that didn't make an Erev can be mevatel to 2 people that have an Erev. What is the Chiddush here? Perhaps one might think that there's room for concern that if 2 people that didn't make an Erev can be mevatel, the next time they'll receive bittul from somebody else, and that can't happen because they didn't have an Erev. They interfere with each other. The Chiddush is we're not concerned about that eventuality. The 4th case was 2 people that don't have an Erev can be mevatel to one person who doesn't have an Erev. And the Chiddush here is, although nobody in this Chatzar made an Erev, perhaps there's room for concern that the Erev concept we totally forgotten, and we shouldn't allow bittul to serve as an alternative in this case. The Chiddush is we don't apply that concern and we allow the bittul to be activated. We proceeded with a Seifa that gave us 3 cases where bittul doesn't work. A person that made an Erev cannot be mevatel to a person that doesn't have an Erev. And the reason here is because the person that made an Erev has a partner. So unless both partners are mevatel, the Erev doesn't work. The next case discussed a scenario where 2 people who made an Erev cannot be mevatel to 2 people that don't have an Erev. The Chiddush here was that the receivers that don't have an Erev, although they interfere with each other, but we're speaking where one of them ultimately was mevatel everything to the other person. So leaves everything in the hands of one person. Still it doesn't work because at the point in time when the 2 people received the bittul, none of them were able to use that bittul. They couldn't carry the chatzah, so they didn't really receive anything. So even though one of them turns around and is mevatel to the other, he doesn't have anything to give over. Therefore it doesn't work. The final case was 2 people that didn't make an Erev would like to make bittul to another people that don't have an Erev. It doesn't work as well. The Gemara says the Chiddush here is, even though when they were mevatel, they told this person, look, take the allowance, take the rishus, on condition that you pass it on to your friend. So it's not really meant to stay there. It's meant to end up by that last person. Chiddush here is it won't work because when he receives it, he has no use for it. He can't use it because there's interference from the other person. Therefore, he hadn't really gotten anything, and he can't pass it on further. Continues the Gemara. Bo minei Rava Rav Nachman. So Rava asked the following shaila of Rav Nachman: Yerush, somebody who inherited property on Shabbos, Mao Shivat Shus. Can he do bittul on Shabbos? Explains Rashi down on the bottom line. Yerush sheshachach aviv v'lo yirev. His father forgot to make an Erev before Shabbos, umeis b'Shabbos, and he passed away on Shabbos itself. V'lo bittul rishusay, nor did the father make bittul. So now the Yerush is the property owner. Mao Shivat Yerush. Can he do bittul? Why would I think he shouldn't be able to do bittul? Explains the Gemara. Hey, chadi boy l'Eruvin me'esma, matzim arif. We have a person who, if he would want to make an Erev yesterday, he can do so. For instance, his father, who can do an Erev. He could have done an Erev before Shabbos. So perhaps over there, bituli nami matzim avatel. He also has the ability to make bittul. Aval, in contrast to this fellow here, kivan di boy l'Eruvin me'esma. Since, should he have wanted to make an Erev with his property from before Shabbos, loy matzim ma'arev, he couldn't do so, but it wasn't his. So perhaps since he didn't have Erev option, he doesn't have bittul option as well. Loy matzim avatel, he can't do bittul, because bittul is merely one element within the larger context of this Erev experience. So if you have ability to make Erev, you have the ability to make Bittul. But this Yerush, who came onto the scene on Shabbos itself, he didn't have the ability to make Erev. So perhaps he can't do Bittul. Or perhaps Yerush carried the a Yerush, a person who inherits, is considered to be like the foot of his father. Now, I'm not specifically speaking about a son or a father, any type of Yerush. It's just a mashal here, that a person who inherits is considered to be like a continuation of the person who inherited the property to him. It's one continuous entity. So although he himself wasn't around on Erev Shabbos, he couldn't make an Erev, but since the Moirish, in this case the father, could have made an Erev, we consider the father and the son like one continuous entity, and the son has the same privileges as the father had. So that was the kasha poster of Nachman, and he responded like this: Amar Le. So Nachman responded to Rava, Ani Omer Mevatel. I maintain that the Yerush can be Mevatel. I hold that the Yerush can to be a continuation of the father. V'hani de Beis Shmuel tanu ein Mevatel. However, those in the Beis Medrash Shmuel, they learned that no, you can't do Bittul. Apparently, they held like the first side of the equation here, that unless you have the full ability to make Erev, you can't do Bittul. Says the Gemara Esvei. So Rava challenged Rav Nachman from a brayso, which seems to indicate that you cannot do Bittul on Shabbos in this case. The brayso says Zakal. This is a general rule. Kol shemutal mixes Shabbos. When something was already mutter for part of Shabbos, so when Shabbos arrives, this place is mutter betiltel. That heter remains throughout. Hutel chol Shabbos, it remains mutter throughout Shabbos, even if something changed along Shabbos. Kol shenesel mixes Shabbos. And conversely, whenever we have something which became usher, even for a portion of Shabbos, so when Shabbos arrives, this place was usher to carry, even if something changed throughout Shabbos, nesel chol Shabbos, the issur remains throughout Shabbos, because these halachas become activated and established during that onset point of Shabbos during Ben Hashmashes, and it won't change. Chutz, except for one case, where although it was usher at the beginning of Shabbos, it can change and become mutter. Mivatul rishus. If a person decides on Shabbos to mivatul rishus. Say we have a case where there was no proper Erev done because one of the people here wasn't a participant in the Erev. They couldn't carry. It was usher. But then that changes, because after he makes bittul, suddenly you can carry throughout the Chatz. So that's an exception. Explains the Gemara. Kol shotam mixas Shabbos. Bittul chol Shabbos. The Brisa tells us that when there was a heter for a portion of Shabbos, that heter remains throughout Shabbos. What is an example? Kigoin Erev derech HaPesach, v'nistam HaPesach. They made an Erev through a doorway. We have a chutzner on either side of a wall, and there's a Pesach in between, provides access one to the other, which allows them to join together and make an Erev. So they made that Erev through the Pesach, but on Shabbos, nistam Pesach, it got blocked up. There's no more access. Well, the Erev still remains intact. Or Erev derech Chaloin, v'nistam Chaloin, they made an Erev through a window, and the window got blocked up. The Erev still remains in place, even though there's no real convenient access point between one Chatz and the other. That's the concept. Once we have a heter, it remains throughout Shabbos. Now the Brisa began with the word zaklau. This is a general rule, which usually comes to include another case, another halach. Zakal lasuye. What is it coming to include? Another case where it was mutter for part of Shabbos and the heter remains. Mavui. A mavui where they would like to carry and they established the kaira, the crossbeam, the lechi, and somehow on Shabbos, a wind came along and blew it away. The were taken away. We say, well, even in this case that the mechitza here disappeared, the kair, the lechi, the heter will still remain throughout Shabbos. What about the second part of the brayso? Kol shenesel mixas Shabbos, nesel chol Shabbos kula. What's an example? When there was an isser applied for part of Shabbos, that isser will remain throughout. Kigoin, for instance, shnei batim, b'shnei tzidur shesurab. We have a Shusarabim and a house on either side. So the place between them is not really enclosed. There's only two mechitzas there. Goyim came along and they enclosed this area. They placed another two mechitzas. So you have a Shusarabim, a house on either side. And the Goyim placed another two mechitzas to complete this enclosure. And the halacha here is that you can never carry in that area throughout this Shabbos. Why? Because even if the people in the houses who have access to this enclosed area would like to make bittul, it won't work, because this place was not enabled for anything at the onset of Shabbos. It was an open Rosh Hashanah. Erev couldn't apply there. Therefore, you couldn't do bittul there either. So that's what the Brisa means, that when a Isser was applied at the beginning of Shabbos, that Isser remains throughout, such as in this case, where it was asked to carry there, you can't do bittul on Shabbos to allow carrying into this area. Zak klal asuyimai. What do the words zak klal come in to include? Another case of something which began Asr and remains Asr. Lasuyei means Nachri b'Shabbos. If a Nachri arrived on Shabbos and he passed away on Shabbos, so when he arrived on Shabbos, he changes the whole configuration here. It's a new situation. They have to make schiras from him and then do a bittul. So it's a whole new situation, which wasn't here during Erev Shabbos. So even after he passes away, they can't do bittul because this configuration was not here during Ben Hashmashos. So that's an example where you have Isser that was there at the onset of Shabbos and remains throughout Shabbos. And the Brisa concludes by saying, we have one exception. Uktani, the Brisa says, Chutz and Batal Rishus, that whenever something was Asr for part of Shabbos, it remains Asr, except when a person who forgot to make an Erev will do bittul on Shabbos. That's okay. So we have a diak here. Ihu in. Only if the person himself, who could have made an Erev, does bittul will work. But Yoresh loy. But a person who's a Yerush and arrives on Shabbos, he can't do bittul because he didn't have the ability to make Erev. This is the Kasha of Nachman. Says, well, no, don't make that diuk. Rather, say as follows. Ema, say, chutz mituras bittul rishus. We're coming to accept the turas bittul rishus, the concept of bittul. Meaning, the concept of bittul can take place on Shabbos, whether it's the person himself, whether it's his Yerush, his son. And according to Rav Nachman, who maintains that even a Yerush can do bittul on Shabbos. Okay, before we proceed to the next kasha, let's just take a quick summary of this brisa. The brisa tells us when something was mutal mixed Shabbos, it remains mutal for entire Shabbos. We have two examples. When they made an Erev through a doorway and got closed up on Shabbos, the Erev remains in place. Or a mavi, which was mutal to carry due to the fact that it had lechi v'kaira. And the lechi v'kaira were taken away on Shabbos, it remains mutal. When something was asr at the onset of Shabbos, it remained asr throughout. What are two examples? It was a saram which was surrounded on Shabbos itself, or a case where a guy arrived and passed away on Shabbos. And one exception is bittul rishus, which can change the halacha even on Shabbos itself and make it mutter. Continues the Gemara, Eisvei, Sirove Esrav Nachman, another kasha. The Brisa says, Echad mibnei chatzer, Shemeis, one of the chatzer members who passed away, V'niach rishusay, and left over his property within this chatzer, he left it le'echad ben hashuk, for somebody that is a non-chatzer member. So what is the halacha here? Mi ba'idyoim, if this happened before Shabbos arrived, Oyser, that person who's now the property owner, makes it asr upon all the other members of the chatzer because he didn't participate in an Erev with them. But if it only happened after nightfall, after Shabbos arrived, he doesn't make it asr because the person who formerly owned this property had already made an Erev in this chatzer, and that Erev, which has been established during the onset of Shabbos, remains intact throughout Shabbos. Continues the Brisa, Ve'echad min hashuk shemeis. What if there was somebody living outside this chatzer who had property in this chatzer and he passed away? And he left over his property inherited to one of the members of this chatzer. So what's the halacha here? If this happened before Shabbos, he doesn't make it asr because the receiver, the current owner of this property, who is a chatzer member, will include this property in his Erev as well. But if this happened after nightfall, after Shabbos, in which case this property was not included in the Erev of the Chatzar, he makes it asr on the other members of the Chatzar because we have a property here which was not included in the Erev. Says, what's the problem? Am I Oyser? Why does he make it asr? Levatel. This person who inherited this property on Shabbos itself, according to Rav Nachman, he can do bittul and make it mutter. Says, well, you're right. My Oyser, nami the Tani. You know what the Brisa means when it says that he's Oyser? After Vatel, up until the point that he does bittul. But if he chooses to be Mevatel, he can do so even though he arrived on Shabbos. Because I hold that a son is considered to be one continuous entity with the father. And then Farshim point out, it not only pertains to a son, any Yerush. He's merely taking over the property and the same dinim that applied to the father, who had the ability to make Erev, and therefore had the ability to make bittul, apply to the son. He can do bittul even in this case. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with a shaila that Abaye asked Rabbah, when a person is being Mevatel's Rishus to others who have an Erev, do we say, well, they're one entity, and therefore even though he approaches them on Shabbos, he needs only to be Mevatel to one of them, and that becomes activated for all of them? Abaye says yes, and Rabbah says no, you need to go over to each one individually to do the bittul. We proceeded with Rabbi asking Rav Nachman a question regarding a Yerush that arrived on Shabbos. Can he do bittul? Or perhaps since he had no ability to do Erev, he can't do Bittul. The Beis Medrash of Shmuel held, no, he can't do Bittul. Whereas Rav Nachman held, yes, he can, because a Yerush is Kari Devor. A son is a foot of his father. He's a continuation. He's considered to be one and the same entity, and therefore he has the ability to make Bittul just as his father did.